Just to alert our sensitive viewers, this episode may contain a bit of coarse language.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Blumendahl.
And my name is Rocco Catroni, and we are the Disability Tangent Podcast.
Each episode, we talk about current issues affecting communities while supporting people with disabilities.
Through research, community connections, and resource sharing, we hope to invite everybody to challenge their perceptions of people with disabilities and promote a more inclusive world.
Defined by what the people actually want and not what others think they want.
Come join us on this journey.
On this episode of the Disability Tangent, we have Gavin Neate, founder of WelcoME, a web-based, person-centered tool designed to give disabled people a dignified way to share their requirements with staff so that interactions are informed, anxiety-free, and friendly. Gavin is a socially engaged entrepreneur with over 30 years' experience as a mobility instructor and disability advocate. He has addressed challenges faced by disabled people with innovative tech since founding his company in 2011. I've known Gavin for 4 years now, and I have to say, this is an incredibly modest bio. He is a champion for the rights of the disabled, has received numerous awards for his advocacy efforts, and has implemented WelcoME throughout numerous venues in the UK and Ireland, including the NHS, Scottish Government, Irish Rail, Northlink Ferries, and while he could not say their name at the time of recording, Levi Strauss. I am very proud to call him a friend and so glad that someone with his drive and passion is out there advocating for me every day. So get ready for a great discussion and to meet Gavin Neate. I'm super excited to have Gavin here with us today to tell people about WelcoME, a web-based tool that gives greater inclusion, which is what we're all about here, is access and inclusion. And so that's why we've wanted to have you on as our first guest, not only because we think that you will allow us to stumble through this in gracious ways, but also because we really love what you are doing and what WelcoME is and what it stands for. So yeah, welcome to Gavin Neate, who has created WelcoME.
Hey!
How many times can I say welcome in one episode?
Lots.
I'm gonna have to count them up later.
Lots. It's a pleasure to be here. Absolutely fantastic to spend time with you both and across the pond. I mean, it is very dark where I am. I don't know what time of day it is with you, probably 3 PM or something. But
Which is nearly dark in Chicago.
It's nearly dark now.
It's pitch black here in Glasgow, in the west coast of Scotland, where I am.
Alrighty, so just kind of jumping right in. I mean, what inspired you to create this platform in general? Like, where did that come from? What gaps did you see and what do you want to fill? Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a super question to open with. And I guess it starts from where I was when I thought of this, or I thought that this was required. So 86 to 96, I was a military police dog handler with the Royal Air Force. And I served all over the world, even spent some time in Alaska, which was absolutely fantastic. But during that time, I was training attack dogs. And in my last base, I was in the northeast coast of Scotland, and I was close to what was the Guide Dogs for the Blind. And I used to go along and do voluntary work. And then one day I was like, what am I going to do when I leave the military? I know, why don't I become a guide dog mobility instructor, which was training people how to use guide dogs. And it just seemed like the perfect job for me. So I joined Guide Dogs for the Blind. I did a 3-year apprenticeship to become a mobility instructor. In 1999, I qualified. And then in about 2003, 2004, somebody, and I was perfectly happy doing that, but somebody turned up to train with a guide dog, took a mobile phone out of their pocket, and the mobile phone spoke to them. And I went, what? That phone's talking to my client. And I was just really, really excited about the fact that technology was going to be this bridge to making the world more accessible for my visually impaired clients at that time. And then over the next few years, I would introduce tech talks on all my classes, and we would talk about the technology that people were using. And of course, there was new technology coming out all the time, but the mobile phone seemed to just be the most amazing bit of kit. And at the same time, I was living the world of a guide dog mobility instructor and training somebody how to use a guide dog. And during that process, you start on the person's shoulder and you whisper in their ear how they should interact with their dog. Tell your dog to sit. Give your dog some praise. whatever it might be. But eventually, towards the end of the training, you're not on their shoulder, you're 10 foot away, you're 10 meters away, you are observing. And then at the end of the walk, you're saying, next time you do this, do this, do this, do this. But one of the things that we used to do is go into shops. And then I would observe from a distance to see how well my client dealt with the customer service team and vice versa. How well did the staff member interact with my client? And I was quite disappointed on a regular basis that the staff member didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to interact with a visually impaired person. So I took it on myself to think, I know I'm going to that particular shop, so why don't I run ahead and speak to the staff member and say, look, my client is going to come through the door. Please remember to do this, 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 and this, and this when they walk through the door. And of course, they would walk through the door. I would observe from a distance. The staff member would say, hello, my name is, I am the such and such here. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk to your guide dog. I do have a dog, but it probably smells mine, but I'm not going to talk to your guide dog. They would offer sighted guide instead of grabbing the person's arm. And they would say, I'm leaving before they would walk away. And my client would have the best customer service they'd ever had because the staff member learnt 5 minutes before the interaction what to do. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I could run ahead of every single blind person or every single disabled person and speak to staff members? And I thought that's a little bit unrealistic. And then, wait a second. And this was like the slowest penny dropping in the entire world, or dime, if you use a dime. So the slowest dime drop you've ever heard in your entire life. And I went, wouldn't it be good if the mobile phone could communicate with the staff member? And that was the start of WelcoME, which is a way of communicating directly with the staff member you're going to be meeting prior to walking through the door. For anybody with any disability, improving how the staff member interacts with a disabled person. And we launched it in 2017, beta version in 2017, 2018 was the launch. And lo and behold, I was the first person in the world to ever do this. Proximity-based staff training, which is just mind-boggling when you think that nobody had done anything like that before. Anyway, I've been babbling on for ages and you've probably got loads of more questions, but that's how WelcoME came into being. That's what it does. It's staff training based on the individual's need when they arrive at a particular venue.
Yeah, that's beautiful, right? Because I mean, you're setting that environment of success for someone, and it also kind of takes off some of that load of the individual to explain, like, hi, this is my name. Yes, I need this additional help. So then if they just know going in there, you're entering into a space that's already welcoming. That's fantastic.
Exactly. And you're doing it without having to, because a lot of people will go into a shop and say, yeah, I have a tracheotomy. Yes, I have a stoma. Yes, I have Parkinson's. Yes, I have acquired brain injury. Yes, I have a stammer. Yes, I am dyslexic. Yes, I have cerebral palsy. Yes, I have a visual impairment. Yes, I have acquired brain injury. And in the moment that you're explaining that for the 5th time that day, you're thinking, I don't even know if they're going to know what I'm talking about. And you've also got a queue of people behind you going, I don't care whether you're dyslexic or not. For God's sake, will you get out of the way of the queue? You're holding everything up. Yeah. So that's a really high pressure moment for that disabled person to self-declare a medical condition in the moment that they need somebody to take into consideration, not knowing if the person is going to even understand what they're talking about. So I just thought, wouldn't it be good if you have that ability to communicate before you walk through the door without having to self-declare? And of course it is. It's much, much easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then when they're using this too, is it like creating profiles, like going through an individual wants to use it versus a business wants to use it? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple stuff, really. When we bought it out, it was an app. So we put it on Google Play and we put it on iOS. And it meant you could download an app and then you could have a profile on the app. But after a period of time, we realized that people were more inclined to want to set up meetings and visits through just an internet connection. So we then launched it as a web app. So it meant that you could go to a website and you could fill out a profile, and then you could look for the venues that were on the platform. You could then say, I'm coming to that venue. Your profile would then trigger training at the venue relevant to your needs. Now, I say trigger training. You don't have to say, I am living with this condition. You could put in undisclosed condition. You could put in ignore me totally when I arrive. And that might be perfectly reasonable for anybody. Of course, you don't have to use it at all. So the options are there for everybody. You don't have to use it in order to actually get service. So you say you're going, that automatically triggers on their screen a notification that you're going to be arriving within a certain period of time. And they get your photograph. This is stuff that you're allowing them to have, a photograph, areas that you would like awareness, An overview of a condition, like this is what Parkinson's is, or this is what aphasia is, or this is what ataxia is. This is how it might affect the person standing in front of you. Here are some top tips on what you should do, what stuff you should put into practice, things that you would learn if you were doing a training course 6 months before, but you would probably only do 5 or 6 different conditions or disabilities. But with this, because you're training somebody, or at least raising awareness in the person half an hour before somebody walks through the door, you can cover as many different disabilities as you want because the situation's on there. Of course, you don't even have to mention disability. You can say undisclosed, and then you can put in a message as to what you want to do. So I'm here for a job interview. I'd like to use accessible toilet before I go for my interview. I'm coming to see a doctor. I'm going to see the nurse. I'm going to gate 32, but I need to go to such and such a shop on the way there. You can put in anything you want. PEEP is a massive one in the UK, personal emergency evacuation plan. So if you turn up at an office block and they don't tell you how to get out in the case of a fire, with this you can specify that you need your PEEP doing when you arrive, which helps everyone, because the last thing anybody wants is, I know somebody came in, I haven't got a clue if they've got out or not, and I don't know what their needs are. That's the last thing a fire officer needs to hear. So PEEP's a really big one for this. So the person then, when they get to the venue, they just press an arrive button on their phone. It sends a message to say that they've arrived and that they're actually wanting somebody to approach them, if they want somebody to approach them. Somebody living with epilepsy, as an example, might not need anyone to help them, but they might want to know that the people who are in that building have had a reminder of the first aid in case they would have a seizure during their visit. Because the last thing many people living with epilepsy want to do is wake up in an ambulance on their way to the hospital. They want to wake up with a cup of tea and then get on with their shopping, many of them, or just go home. So it's not just about, this is the level of service I want when I get, it's this is the level of service I don't need when I get there. Somebody who's living with a neurodiverse condition might want to go in, pick the thing up, go to the counter without staff, bleep it through and get the hell out of there as quickly as possible without any interaction. That's also possible with this system. That's how it works.
Yeah, so sometimes what's welcoming is being avoided.
Yeah. We've all been to shops where the first thing that happens is, hello, sir, how can I help you today? And you're like, oh, come on, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's your choice. It's all about the choice. And the other thing here is that the disabled person chooses the level before they get through the door. I wish we could all do that, but let's just level the playing field for disabled people first, if that's okay.
Yes, work on the rest of society after we've created.
We'll fix that later. Yeah, we'll fix that later.
Yeah, become a little bit more fluent in doing that, and then that just becomes part of our vernacular, right? And
yeah.
I think it's a really interesting point that you also brought up with, I know several individuals that have epilepsy and other seizure conditions, and there was one particular instance that I was thinking of where an individual was on public transit and they had an episode, or how they describe it as an episode, and they were moved off because people are like, oh, we have to put them in the recovery position, let's put them on the ground, let's that. And then in that process, the person got more injured because they were doing that. And they're like, man, people only knew to be like, leave them. They're fine. Make sure their airway's clear. Don't move.
There's a really good point here, is that we've all done first aid at some point in our lives. We've all done some sort of first aid training, whether it was at school or whether we were a lifeguard at school or whether we've started a job and somebody said you need to do some first aid training. Mm-hmm. And we've all had a little bit of information, even if we've seen it on a film or read it in a book. We've gone, right, okay, recovery position. Everybody has heard of the recovery position, even if they can't remember what it is. But sometimes by trying to help, we do the wrong thing, or by not being certain, we avoid helping when we should help. Whereas if you could get, let's just imagine for a second in this some strange world where you're wearing a pair of Google glasses and somebody faints in front of you. Imagine all of the information you needed popped up on a screen in front of you in that moment. You'd go, right, do this, do this, do this, do this. Now, the trouble is that when we do staff training, and staff trainers are brilliant, and I love face-to-face training, especially when it's delivered by a disabled person who's interacting with a non-disabled person. It might be the first interaction they've had with a disabled person, and I love that training. However, with the best will in the world, if we train somebody in a massive load of information over the period of a day or 2 days, if we expect them to remember that and recall it instantly when they need it, 2 years later, or even 6 months later, we're fooling ourselves. They're not going to remember it. The people who will remember it are people who've had personal experience. So if my father lives with dementia and I'm experiencing that every day and I get some dementia awareness training, much more chance of me remembering it. But if I have got dementia training and I've never known anybody with dementia, 6 months later, even if I have an inkling of what it might be, I might not be confident enough to put that into practice. So this in the moment training is really, really useful.
Yeah, their memories are more anchored to that, right? Because they've
Yeah.
seen it. They have a lived experience of it now. It's not just, I saw this video once, or here's this vignette where they went through it. It's, I was holding this person or engaging in that way. That's amazing.
That's the best possible training you can get, is where you get hands-on and interacting with somebody. The first day that you meet somebody who has a prosthetic limb, and you have the sort of awareness or the confidence to put out your right hand and shake somebody's prosthetic limb instead of waving or air kissing or whatever it is you might do. If you feel that they are wanting you to give it a shot, and you know that they want you to give it a shot, you could build up the courage. Now, when you do it for the first time and you get a buzz from being that human, you suddenly go, I want to do this again. And in customer service, if you want to do it again, you're going to stay in customer service because you love it. How many people get out of customer service because they just go, I'm fed up of getting it wrong?
Yeah, because those are uncomfortable interactions on both sides many times, which the training helps.
Yeah, and if we could train
yeah.
people every 2 months, it'd be fine. But it can't. It's really expensive to do that kind of level of training. And hospitality, retail, tourism, these are all high turnover areas. You could train 100 members of staff, and 2 months later, 20% have moved on.
Yeah,
really hard to do it. Really hard to do it. And just on that, I had a washing machine that broke, and I opened the door, and the seal on the washing machine was perished, was destroyed. And I went, oh, I need a new seal. It was obvious. I didn't have to call a plumber out. I went, the seal's broken. I went on to Amazon. I ordered a new seal because I knew the maker of the washing machine. The seal turned up 2 days later. I went on YouTube. I saw a video about how to fit the seal. I watched the video, and as I was watching the video, I fitted the seal. I'm not a plumber. I just saved myself $120 in actually doing that. So the information is out there, better than ever. It's not Encyclopedia Britannica, which one's about washing machines. You're not pulling that off the side. It's on YouTube. Pretty much everything is there on YouTube if you want to learn it. And there are enough, you go on Facebook or any of these sort of meetup groups, and there's somebody who can help you or talk you through it. So use that information. What an amazing age to live in.
Yeah, you could just have a friend in Scotland teach you how to make your sourdough bread, for instance.
Just like that.
For instance, you could have a friend named Gavin who happens to be in Scotland, and you could be like, hey, didn't you have a bread hobby? And he'll be like, yes. So, here's how you do better.
I'm very lazy when it comes to my advice. What was my advice to you on how to make the best sourdough bread?
The best sourdough bread was to make 50 loaves of sourdough bread.
the most lazy training in the entire world.
You're like, keep going. Make some more. But you also were very encouraging. You're like, that bread is shit. Make some more bread. And then you made fun of that bread, and then just kidding. You're very kind.
I mean, it's like most things, make 50 of the thing, and there's a very good chance by the time you get to 50, you've actually improved dramatically because you've learned through experience. Sadly, when it comes to interacting with disabled people, if you say, I'll get it wrong 50 times in a row, you're going to be hurting a lot of people in doing that. You've got to learn a lot quicker. And you need to be able to learn very, very quickly, because people's lives can be made a misery if you discriminate against them. And you might be the fifth person to discriminate against them that day. And I would imagine some of the people that will be listening will know about spoon theory and all this. If you've got a certain number of spoons and you've managed to get rid of 4 of them before you even leave the house, the fifth opportunity for you to get rid of another spoon might be the moment that you go, and then just go back to your house and stay there, because you're worried you've run out of spoons for the day. So you don't want to be depressing yourself with another interaction that's poor.
Exactly. Yeah, because I can't experience 30 people who say, I'll get it wrong the first 49 times, because that's me experiencing something bad over and over and over again, which is not really acceptable.
You'll forgive people. It's easier to forgive people when it's your first or second of the day. And I've always maintained that if you work out the intent of the person who's discriminated, we all know that if a 5-year-old child discriminates, we're like, they didn't intend to be nasty. They're just getting it wrong because they just don't know. But when somebody quite obviously says something that is meant to hurt and it's discriminatory, you're going to swing for them, aren't you? But if somebody says something and they just don't know, and a great example, if somebody from the United States came to Britain and used the word handicapped, in Britain, the person who's disabled, they'd get prickles on their spine. It would just be like, whoa, I can't believe he's used that word. But if you understand that the person you're talking to is American, you go, in America, that's perfectly reasonable language, or at least it was last time I had a chat. But if you talk to people from the United Arab Emirates, persons of determination is the terminology in UAE. And if I heard that, I'd get a bit prickly. Oh, this is a person of determination. You go, what? But in UAE, that's perfectly acceptable. So it has to be about the intent of the person who's actually doing the speaking. Do they mean to hurt me? Am I hurt truly if I understand that they're a 5-year-old child? They're not meaning to get it wrong. But if you've done it 5 times in a day, it's going to drain you.
Exactly. Because I mean, there's only so much bandwidth that anybody has with that. And then when it does come from a 5-year-old, you're like, you know what? And I'm also speaking as an individual that has a kid that's turning 4, and nothing cuts as hard sometimes as at the end of a really long day. And then your kid says, Papa, your tummy is huge, or something like that. You're like, well, that just cut me down. Okay, thanks for that. But if that happened in the morning, I'd be like, yeah, that's funny. Cool.
You're like, I can't handle it. Yeah, I can't handle it now. So a couple things that you've mentioned that I want to come back to a little bit, and one of them is expense. I know you just had was it Purple Tuesday, and talk about the Purple Pound Tuesday in UK, which we really don't have here in the US. We probably should. We could call it the disabled dollar instead. But I know that you're very passionate about the idea that we're not just doing this to be nice, right? There's other reasons this is valuable for businesses to engage with.
Yeah, and there's lots of reasons for this. For many years, providing services for disabled people was a corporate social responsibility. You did it because it was the right thing to do. And I've had this conversation just recently, is under pressure, somebody who is spending money, if they're under financial pressure, will get rid of, the first thing they will get rid of is the right thing to do. Because that's the top of the tree. That's an expense. We're going to have to tighten some nuts and bolts here. So what can we get rid of? And if you look at something as it's the corporate social responsibility, you kind of go, well, look, that's kind of fluffy. We don't really need to be doing it. So we'll remove that so that we can stay afloat. But when you realize that a fifth of the planet, a fifth of the population, where a fifth of the planet are people who are living with a disability, and virtually every single person who hasn't died prematurely immediately is going to be disabled at some point. And I like to say to people, it's the largest minority in the world that isn't a minority. It's just ginormous. We're all going to be requiring of services designed for disabled people at some point, which is phenomenal when you think about it. It's not about how many people are on the planet right now. It's about how many people are going to need this service over the next 80 years. And it's all of them. And that's a lot of people, but it's also a lot of cash. And if I was trying to appeal, now I'm going to be cynical here. If I was trying to appeal to somebody that was just thinking about making money, then I would need to be explaining to them how they could be losing money if they don't do it, or how somebody else is going to be making money and getting more market share because they're doing it. But we don't necessarily have to be that cynical. I know lots of people in Google, Microsoft, Apple, government organizations, big retailers, and they have people working within these organizations who are champions. And they haven't just been brought in as a sort of bit of fluff. They've been brought in because the senior management team have said, we need to up our game. And we're actually in the process of working with a massive, ginormous American retailer who works in the UK, who said, no, the senior management team know that we need to be selling to disabled people as much as we sell everybody else. We need to up our game, because if we don't, not only won't we sell to them, but we will lose these customers to our competitors. He was also very aware that they have more and more disabled people working for them who also want to be able to provide these services. So we're looking at that. We're saying there's a lot of money out there and we need to get it. But also the business model of my company had to reflect sustainability. So I needed to find a way where the company was going to grow bigger and bigger. We're not a charity, we're a limited company. So I want to make money for my investors, and I want those investors to go, whoa, I love this. Social good. I'm investing in social good. It doesn't have to be rockets and bombs and oil and blood diamonds. It can be social good, and I can make money, and I feel happy that I'm making money as an investor. Now, to do that, traditionally, I could turn around and I could say, we're going to charge every disabled person $1.50 to have this service, and then that will give us, as long as we get 50,000 downloads, we've got some good money coming in, blah, blah, blah. But I knew that I needed to make this so that it was cost neutral for disabled people. I needed them to be able to get a service in customer service that raised them up to the same level of customer service as everybody else got. So they weren't having to pay in order to get the same level of something. Now, most disabled people pay more money to get the same as everybody else, be that public transport or clothing or whatever it might be, or services. I didn't want that to happen. So I had to find a model which would work in a way that would mean my investors could make money, disabled people weren't charged, but the businesses could actually get access to better income themselves, commerciality. And it was just paying a monthly subscription for WelcoME. So the business pays a monthly subscription. They get more people through the door. They get better, happier, more loyal customers. They get happier, more professional staff. They get more money coming through the door. They get to sell more, and they get really happy because of it. And of course, that's the purple pound or the disabled dollar, whatever we would like to call it. And that is proof that we can access the money that for years we've not got, or that Mr. Bezos has got, because he's just said it's okay, disabled people can shop from home, which is the end of days if we all just stay at home and shop from there. We have to go out and meet and interact with other humans. Otherwise, what's the blooming point?
Exactly. And what's really interesting about that particular point is it's not only are the companies potentially benefiting from that because they're having more people come to their shop and they're getting more dollars, they're not going to their competitors, but because then more people who are disabled or who have disability identities are showing up there, then these spaces are starting to become less and less homogenous. And there's more of this interaction between people where it's like, oh, I do see this person doing things. I'm around, I see the store owners modeling how to support someone else. So it just becomes part of the common zeitgeist.
Yes, exactly it. And that's the bigger picture here, because I wanted a company that could survive as a company and grow as a company, but I also wanted social change.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I trained a chap who had a firework explode in his face, and it destroyed a lot of his face. He had a lot of plastic surgery. And everywhere I went with him, with his guide dog, people would stare at him. And I was like, stop staring at him. And of course, they were staring at him because they hadn't seen it before. But if you saw more disability, if you saw more people out on the street, you then it just becomes normal. Now we look at films like Coda, or if we look at amazing people out there who are disabled people who are in politics, or disabled people who are on our film, like the young chap, and I can't remember his name, who was in Breaking Bad, who had, I think he had cerebral palsy. When we see people on our TV screens who represent society, we no longer feel that they are different. They're in front of the camera, behind the camera, sports personalities, and goodness knows you've got amazing ones. They're now in senior levels in businesses, and it just means that we start going, they're not different, they're the same as us. And it's exactly the point you made, which is everybody is a potential customer, so make sure that you appeal to everybody.
Exactly. And it's even that portrayal component of it where it's not, oh, this poor person, oh, we're really trying to help. Oh, look, they're getting out there. This is great. It's just, oh, part of daily life, people are in this space. Right. And I think especially with that modeling component of what we're seeing, like shopkeepers engage in that can serve for someone else, but then also it kind of goes beyond some of that like Allport's like contact theory stuff. It's not just, oh, we're around other people. It's we're around other people. And now there's this more intentional way to engage that really assists that person and really says you are full on welcomed here as a consumer, as an individual that wants to be here, that wants to be a patron at this place because those are the things that make you happy. And that's just such a wonderful approach.
You mentioned the word welcome there, and or somewhere here is going to be the logo of my company, which was me just looking at the word welcome one day and going, oh, there's a me in welcome. Right at the end there's an M and an E. I'd never seen that before. And there are so many reasons why, if you just change the font in the M and the E in the welcome, and you suddenly go, oh, there's a me in welcome. Well, when you think about that in any depth, you realize that the word welcome is above pretty much every business you could see. And it's in the documentation. It says, we want you to have a warm welcome. And then you think, how many disabled people feel welcome because of the discrimination they might be feeling, or just low-level discrimination, or somebody going, oh, you've been in the wars, or what's wrong with you, or when are you going to get better, or any number of sentences which are meant to make somebody feel happy but make them feel freaking mad. And I just changed the M and the E into a different font. And when people read it now, I say, what does that say? And they say, it says, welcome me. And you go, no, it just says welcome. You've just recognized me for the first time. And think of me as a disabled person coming in, and am I getting the same welcome as everybody else? No. So just up your game, and here's a way to up your game.
Fantastic.
I like it.
That's good. That's
I mean, I like it too. So I think it was a good choice.
This episode is sponsored by Emily Krejci, the creator of our fabulous cover art here at the Disability Tangent. You can find her amazing work on Redbubble. Go to redbubble.com and search for Emily Krejci Shop. That's EMILYKREJCI. Or check out the link in the show notes below.
I did say there were two questions I had.
No, but I waffle on so much.
And one of the others that I have for you, I rarely hear you address. You did say the part that is, I'm not disabled yet. We'll all be disabled at some point. But I'm curious about your personal experiences with temporary disability, which I don't hear you talk about publicly very often. And I would love to hear about, because you're not a disabled person, but I know that you have had experiences that have disabled you. And I wondered if you would share a little bit about those personal experiences.
The thing is, it's a direct question I will share with you, Christy. So as you say, I don't consider myself a disabled person yet. And I ... yet, because my knees are already in a situation where if I crouch down, then I'm not getting back up again unless I'm holding on to something, because I've got early onset arthritis in my knees. I keep calling it early onset, like I'm not getting old, but now it's kind of like perfectly timed onset arthritis in my knees. Because but I can call it early when you're 32. But at the age of 21, when I was in the military, I prolapsed a vertebrae and it impinged on my nerve, and it gave me the most terrible pain and numbness down my leg. It wasn't until I was 27 that I got my first back operation. And then I had a car crash in my late 30s, and then and then I was scunnered at that point. And then my back was in pieces. And then I went to Germany and had another back operation when I was 38. Now, it really curtailed me, but it meant that from the age of 21 to the age of 38, I wasn't able to do a lot of stuff. I was still working and all the rest of it, but I mean, I couldn't really do much sport and the things that I really wanted to do. But that was a very early experience of disability. But then at the age of 41, I think it was, I had a headache, fell over. I was lying on the ground for a little while in my house, luckily. And I then woke up, went to bed, had a couple of hours sleep. This was at like 3 p.m, had a really bad headache. That was on a Friday, went to the doctor on the Monday morning, having had a pretty dreadful weekend of pain. And they said, right, you need to get to hospital. I went to hospital. They gave me a scan, thinking that it would just be over and done. And then a couple of minutes later, somebody came in and said, we need to send you for another scan. The doctor then came out and went, you've had a brain hemorrhage. We need to get you to another hospital so that they can carry out some more tests. You're then going to be given this full-on test. If your brain blood clot hasn't done what we want it to do, then we're going to have to operate in order to save your life. Luckily, I had another scan and they said, no, it's dissipating, but we're going to have to help it. But I spent the next 6 days in hospital with an almighty, horrible headache. Like if somebody had said, you're going to continue like this, I'd have been like, I'm going to have to cut my head off. It would just be insane. The pain was just incredible. And it was just a dreadful, dreadful situation to be in. And at that moment, I guess because I've been working in disability my entire life, I was aware of disability, but this was the first time that I'd become aware of mortality. And I'm not going to say it was an epiphanal moment for me, but it became very much in sharp relief that I was here for a limited amount of time and I needed to do something in that amount of time. The time that I have left, I wanted to make sure that I had actually completed my task. And I remember when I was lying on the gurney waiting to go through for this test, somebody, the chap said to me, we're going to have to operate to save your life if it goes one of two ways. And all I could think of was that I hadn't finished WelcoME at that point. I wasn't thinking family or anything like that. I was just going, but wait a second, if I don't do this, who's going to do it? Because I'm the only person doing it right now. So how does it then progress? I was thinking, but I've got to finish this. So I came out of that situation, again, not feeling disabled, but knowing that mortality was just around the corner. And I don't know how long I'll be able to continue doing what I'm doing. But the truth is, I have no fear of disability. I know if it was landed on me, then I would have to go through a process of bereavement. But I know so many brilliant, amazing, awesome disabled people that I can't possibly be afraid of that. It will change my life and curtail how I do things, but I'm not afraid of it. And when I meet disabled people, I don't go, you're amazing. I go, you're amazing for getting over all the barriers that people put in front of you. But I'm not inspired by their ability to get over disability because I know that they can and have and will. I'm inspired by them putting up with the BS that they have to put up with the rest of the planet putting in front of them. So yeah, as far as disability is concerned, I've had these moments where I've gone, I get it. And on top of working in disability for so long and then having an opportunity to actually experience it, I do. And I've got more of an understanding. Good question.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. People, when you say you've had a brain hemorrhage, it is so serious. People go, what? And I was told by a nurse at the time, I know 5 people that have had the same brain hemorrhage of you and only 2 of them survived and you're one of them. And I was like, bloody hell. Okay, that's a bit dodgy. But there's a difference between permanent and short-term disability. So yeah, I'm absolutely fine now, apparently.
And there is a difference, but what you've created helps across the spectrum, right? So it does help people that are in this temporary situation as well. So if you have back surgery, great. Use WelcoME while you need it. And then if you don't need it later, fantastic, right?
100%. Yeah. We don't ask people to prove disability to use WelcoME, but if you want to pretend that you're disabled in order to make sure that somebody treats you the same as somebody who's not disabled, that's totally up to you. For me, that's mental health issues than disability, but that person is doing that. But yeah, if you break your leg on a skiing accident, you're going to need some little help with the door. So let them know, use WelcoME. You don't have to prove disability to use WelcoME.
Yeah, and even individuals that might want to, because I'm sure there's going to be detractors saying people are going to take advantage of this, and there might be additional mental health considerations associated with that. But then that opens it up more. It's like, okay, then if individuals were maybe the way that this is being carried out now, maybe there's an addition to this now. It's okay. We're looking at more of like, how do we move within this space? How are we approach? What are the socialization components of it? Versus an individual, I'm really anxious about this. What times of the day are less people here? Or ways can we kind of look at this?
Exactly. And I will say that, I mean, I'm sure that somebody sooner or later will pretend to be blind when they're not blind. That could happen. Yeah, all power to them, because that's a bit of a challenge. But we've not had any reports of anybody misusing the system in the
Excellent.
5 years it's been around.
Excellent. Yeah. And I think that's something that's a huge detractor that I hear just in different spheres. I don't want to go too far in or name anything with that. It's, well, what if people take advantage of this? I'm like, any system people are going to take advantage of. And in many cases, we might see that as a bad thing, but for other people, it might be better because we don't know the full story behind that. But we shouldn't stop doing something because of that, right? We can't come up with every path and avenue that could possibly happen and say, in this one case of 100, it's going to screw us over, so maybe we should stop. But
and the detractors will mention that
exactly
covers all cases. If I can help one disabled person get better customer service and feel more comfortable leaving home, and
exactly.
I have people using the system in order to, I don't know what they're going to get as an advantage. But if I help one person who goes, you know what, I'm no longer staying at home, then I'll be more than happy with that. Thank you.
Exactly. And that kind of makes me think of a lot of people that push back a lot on universal design principles in general, where they like, I don't even know how to make my space universal design if everybody has to be here. what does that look like? But I feel like with something like WelcoME, you at least can start in some point. You're like, oh, you know what? I've noticed that more individuals with wheelchairs are coming in, or you know what? I've noticed more people that experience CP are coming in. What can I do there? And you can do it little bits at a time.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh,
Well,
maybe
it's
I,
anonymized.
yeah,
Yeah. Let's just say we have an airport with 40,000 people using a system. Let's say 5,000 of those people used WelcoME in a year.
mhm,
And anonymized, we would know 10% were hearing impaired, 15% were visually impaired, 45% were neurodiverse. Because it was anonymized, we wouldn't have any details on any of these people. But if we turn around to the airport and they went, oh, wait a second, so there's actually a larger number of neurodiverse people than there are visually impaired people. So we'll put a little bit more effort into doing something like that. So it's the data that comes with this that's going to make a massive difference. But yeah, I totally take your point. It's important stuff.
one of the questions that I have is as people are using things like this, using WelcoME, maybe there's other devices or other software that might come out that is similar and doing things like that. Do you have any words of caution associated with that? Because I know some of the things that you've said in the past where it's great when there's like a training, especially by someone with a disability, like what kind of information is being delivered as you're going through this process and creating this thing that is doing the thing that you intended to use. And have you run into anything where like, people making this should watch out for this kind of thing or something that people should know about?
It's a super question. I think the one that sprang to mind as soon as you said it would be that when a company white labels a solution, so let's just say Target said, we're going to have a customer service solution just for America, and it's just going to be for Target stores. We're not going to cover any other stores at all. What choice does that give the disabled person? I would say if somebody's going to be doing this, think about it being Pandisability, all disabled people, not just visually impaired people, not just hearing impaired people, and also then think about it cross-sector. So I want somebody to get off a train where they used WelcoME. I want them to walk into a bank and get some money out using WelcoME. I want them to come out of there and go shopping using WelcoME. I want them to leave the shop and go into a restaurant using WelcoME. And I want them to go to the hotel using WelcoME or another device that does all of that. What I don't want, and what I think disabled people don't want, is 15 different apps to get customer service in every venue they go to. Google Maps doesn't just do Google Maps for San Francisco, it does it for everywhere. So you go, I want it to do everything. If you think of disability as this is just for this group of people, not only do you cut it down to not being 1.3 billion people you can help, you also make it much more challenging to be a sustainable product. If you say, here's a brilliant business model and it helps as many people as possible, you're going to have more chance to grow and be sustainable. But in our system, we're not just helping disabled people, we're helping staff. In fact, you could say that we're helping staff as much as we're helping disabled people. And if we're helping staff, we're helping the business. And if we're helping the business and my company makes money, I'm employing staff. And if my company grows and makes money, I'm also helping investors. So it's a win-win-win-win-win-win situation. There's not many people that lose. And if everybody buys into this, then as you mentioned earlier, we're helping society because everybody gets to see best practice. So I would say if you're coming up with a solution, try and be as wide as you possibly can and think about your business model and sustainability. Answer that question.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Yeah, because I can definitely see people jumping off and to your point about because then if there's a million apps or there's not a good integration into that component, then it's okay. Now this is just one of 17 other things that I have to put on my load and think about, address and question.
Yeah. And sooner or later, all of these solutions are amalgamated into one and they become something that's just perfectly usable. So there's a massive challenge out there. The other thing is that people are making an app for hearing impaired people and they don't make it so that visually impaired people can use it, forgetting that a lot of hearing impaired people are visually impaired people.
Yes.
And you just go, guys, you need to be thinking about everybody. I spoke to a tour company the other day that just helps deaf and hearing impaired people. And I went, yeah, but some of those people are living with cerebral palsy and autism and dyslexia and diabetes. And you go, you need to have an understanding of all disabilities rather than, oh no, you just have to be deaf. No, nobody else, just deaf people.
Yeah, no co-occurring conditions. Like we're only here for one.
Which
doesn't happen.
Like I just am a co-occurring condition. So I totally get that. I feel like I don't want to have an app for, oh, here's one a thing to deal with pain, and here's one for focus, and here's one for, I need something that addresses my life, and my life encompasses all these different aspects. I have all of the things and I want all of the things to be addressed. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like there's so few people, it sounds weird, but there's so few people that have just one disabling condition. Like,
have you any idea what the percentage is, Christy? Somebody said to me once that if you're disabled, if you have one disability, there is an increased chance you have another disability. Or I think it's something crazy like 65% chance.
Yeah, it's a huge percentage. And then the other thing is that the likelihood of you having adverse childhood experiences increases, the likelihood of trauma, the likelihood of having depression, all of those things increase. And then that creates a circle. So I have more pain because I have more depression. And so there continue to be things that interact with one another. It's not I get one diagnosis and then that doesn't affect anything else in my life.
Living in poverty as well. More chance of living in poverty if you're disabled, because there are less disabled people who are in work. So, and if they are in work, they're in lower paid jobs.
People in poverty have more likelihood of having diabetes and high blood pressure and all of these things, because in poverty you have less access to healthy foods. And there's all of these different things that affect one another. It's not like you get this one thing and then that's the only thing that affects you.
Which is interesting because in the last 300-400 years, when charities were set up, charities dealt with one particular thing. So this is a charity for visually impaired people. This is a charity for hearing impaired people. This is a charity for visually impaired people who have a certain condition. This is a visual impairment charity just for guide dog owners. We've compartmentalized them all so that ultimately, if you're looking at a pedestrian crossing, for example, where you have tactile paving, brilliant for hearing or visually impaired people, actually quite rubbish for wheelchair users. That wheelchairs are not much fun, especially if you've got hypersensitivity. You're going over a tactile paving and you're thinking, actually, that's a little bit painful. Or if you've got hypersensitivity in your feet, if you're maybe diabetic or whatever it might be, and you feel pain in your foot, when you tread on a tactile paving, it can be really sore. So there's this situation where they have to be taken in universal design, which you mentioned. There has to be something that pulls it together as much as it possibly can. And the other thing, and a lot of people talk about universal design, and I talk about the physical environment, but I focus on the social environment. You can have the most accessible building in the entire world, and if the security guard comes up and says no dogs allowed, and you're going to be like, wait a second, this is the most accessible building in the entire world. How can I not get in with a guide dog? And it's because the security guard hasn't had the input on guide dogs at that point. Exactly. And you go, let's make sure that we don't just focus on the physical world, because even then, I think it's something like in Europe, only 4% of people who are disabled have wheelchairs or power chairs. And there are plenty of other people that wouldn't care if they approach steps. They're like, yeah, I don't have a problem with steps. It's getting to the top and opening the door I might have a problem with, because I can't work out if it push pulls, and then I'm going to get freaked out by the fact that I don't know what I'm going to do. And so we have to understand that there's not just a physical world that we need to fix. We need to fix the emotional and social world as well.
Yeah, I love that point, because there's so much of it that isn't about the physicality of it. It's about being accepted, which isn't always about how does this function. Yeah.
Exactly. I think what becomes prohibitive over something else. I mean, I think of education systems in particular. And I know, Christy, you and I have had many conversations about that, where you walk into a building, they hit that ADA compliance component of it. The bathrooms have this, there's guardrails here, the hallways are a certain size. But then being there is cost prohibitive, or trying to engage in a classroom activity is not time prohibitive. It's time prohibitive for an individual that might need more time, or they can't see the thing on the slide, or the professor is saying, yes, I see what you're saying, but we have to finish this at the end of the semester because I can't do anything about that. Then all of that stuff kind of fails, and there's design.
Student says horrible things to you about how you're not disabled enough. Yeah, that can also be a problem.
Exactly.
But the thing is, when you fix a building, it stays fixed, generally speaking, for quite a while. But when you train somebody, it only remains fixed while that person is the person you're going to interact with. And as soon as the receptionist changes, who you got on really well with, or the shopkeeper, as soon as they change, you're back to square one again. Unless there's a way of making sure that their knowledge is constantly, the process is there to constantly remind them how best to interact. Disabled people go to the same places over and over again because they're confident in, or more confident about how they will be interacted with. Very seldom want to go to new places because it's starting from scratch again. But of course, after COVID, a lot of the staff that they knew at a lot of the venues they knew had changed. So they're going back to square one. So we had a massive, certainly in the UK, a massive problem with disabled people feeling confident to go out again because they knew they were going to meet people they'd never met before, even in their corner shop.
Yeah.
The world was literally different.
Exactly. Yeah. And they hadn't had training, a lot of the guys that were out there working in these jobs then.
Also, look how good Gavin is at taking us from our tangent and bringing us back to the point, which is talking about WelcoME. See, we don't need a timer. I know. We just need Gavin to come on every week so that we can have him be like, no, y'all are missing the point. Come back.
It only exists for me because I know it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
And when people talk about training or they talk about physical world, I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't work. And I've had so many people go on social media and say, I went to a shop and it was terrible. And then the following week, because the people in the shop went, we need to fix this, the report on social media was, I went back to that shop and it was brilliant. And what that does is it basically says, right, you can put your head back in the sand again because you're brilliant again. But of course, 2 weeks later, they might be dreadful because there's a different staff member. So they need to put a process in place. Starbucks, McDonald's are great examples of when somebody comes in the morning before they open up. They come in and there's a process. It says, do this, clean this, fix that, open this, do this, replace this, do this. And they go through that process and then they open the door and let the person in. If we had the ability to actually put that process into place for every single person we spoke to, wouldn't we use it? We certainly would, but we don't have that power because we can't recall everything in the moment for every individual that's standing in front.
Then, I mean, if people start becoming fluent with that, though, as well, I mean, how many of those visual aids would you need after a while? So maybe someone like coming in the future and they say we have a higher rate of individuals with cerebral palsy coming in. You know what? I've interacted with 7 customers coming in before. You're already kind of coming at this basis and you're building off of that versus learning it new each time.
That's exactly it. And I make a point of saying this with WelcoME. If a guide dog owner walks through the door and the staff member interacts with them correctly and gets good feedback from that, the next guide dog owner who walks through the door, whether using WelcoME or not, will get better customer service from that staff member because 2 days before they were reminded as to how they should interact. And that's the same for absolutely any of the different conditions that are on the platform. You don't need everybody to use WelcoME. You just need 1 in 50 to use it because you're constantly reminding staff members how to interact. It's just this ongoing training tool.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You said getting back to WelcoME again, but it only exists because the problem exists.
I mean, to your point too about bringing in how Krejci's saying like, hey, we're bringing it back to WelcoME, but that goes to your point of we have to think of all of it, right? So it's not I'm only helping X individual piece with these 4 very specific co-occurring conditions. I mean, you're putting it to practice even just in the conversation that we're having here. That's okay. This does apply to this. You know what? Maybe we should be thinking about that. You know what? Here's how we thought about it before. And I think that's definitely a good model for people to kind of think about. How are these things interacting with each other? What are those intersectional differences? And how is that actually going to have the real impact that we're trying to intend to have?
You are asking exactly the right question. And it's sadly something that we've stopped doing. I wrote an article on LinkedIn recently called What, Why, How. And in the past, it's a story about 3 friends, what, why, and how. They would sit at a table. Somebody would say what the problem was. Why would go, why is that a problem? Why has that happened? And how would go, how are we going to fix it? But what's happened with social media is we're now in a situation where everybody's saying what's wrong. Nobody is saying, why is it wrong? When you say, why did that security guard discriminate? And you go, because they only started last week and they hadn't had training yet. You go, how do we fix that? When you say, what's the problem? I had terrible customer service. Oh, they should be taken to court and sorted. We don't think about why something happens. And I would always say, why did it happen? Why did that happen? And if you ask yourself why, and you take out and I could talk about politics, you go, why did a certain person get into power? Because these people were feeling let down. And you go, that's why it happened. How can we stop them from getting let down? And then we've got what happened? Why did it happen? How can we stop it from happening again? And if only those three buddies all got back together again and started discussing instead of being in their own little silos. Academia is brilliant at the why. Inventors are fantastic at going to the shed at the bottom of the garden and fixing things and going and fixing stuff they don't necessarily need to be fixed, but they'll go and fix stuff because they're just amazing, pragmatic people. But what never passes this on to the why and the how, which is
Exactly.
What, why, how.
Exactly. I completely agree with that, right? Because then it's everybody shouting into win, and there's all these calls to action, and a lot of people saying the same things, and then every 5 years the same thing pops up again.
It's the political cycles.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally
which is one of the reasons that we wanted to start this and build on this and start a coalition around this, and because we want to bring the what, why, how together, right? Like to keep these conversations going, and then also to just start some sort of a big list of people that are working on stuff, and then what do they need, and how do we get that to them. And so I guess if we were going to ask you some of those questions, like what is the future of WelcoME, and what would you need from your community in order to advance that?
The future of WelcoME is not welcome. The future of WelcoME is something else, because something that somebody else has come along, they might buy WelcoME and go, yeah, we'll do it bigger. It could be Google, it could be anybody. They could just go, yeah, we're going to put in millions of pounds instead of the tens of thousands of pounds or dollars that I can put into it. And they'll go like, we've got 100 people to work on this instead of 3. So the future is everybody understands that if you know 5 minutes before somebody walks through the door how to serve them, that you're going to do it better. We do it online really well. So the future of WelcoME is that everybody does proximity-based staff training for disability. That's the future. And hopefully it will be connected to WelcoME, because I need to pay my staff and my investors need to get some payback and stuff like that. But what was the second part of that question? Because I just totally went off it there for a second. It was...
And what would you need from the community to get there? I mean, how can we be supportive?
So this is the thing that I totally... when I thought of WelcoME, I went, right, how do I spread this? So within our service, if people were to have a profile, if they go into the section that says help, they can request new venues. Okay, so let's just imagine for a second that 100 people said Target should have WelcoME. They went on social media and they went hashtag WelcoME app, or at well-co.me, or WelcoME. I wish Target at Target could have WelcoME. Let's just imagine 100 people did that. Well, Target would ignore it. Let's imagine 1,000 disabled people said, I wish my voting station had WelcoME. I wish my government offices had WelcoME. I wish IKEA had WelcoME. I wish the local Target had WelcoME. Now imagine having 10,000 disabled people. And that is a tiny, tiny fraction of the number of disabled people out there. Imagine having 1 million disabled people saying that the voting system needs something like WelcoME so that I can vote in person, where you're telling me I can no longer do a postal vote. Disabled people then become the power, because God damn it, they deserve to be. They are 1.3 billion people at any one time, and everybody, as we discussed earlier. So as far as I'm concerned, what I want is for WelcoME to become the tool with which disabled people can express what they want. I got bad customer service. It's terrible. Oh, I got bad customer service. Here's how to improve customer service. So I want everybody around the world to be going, we need proximity-based technology, because when they look into that, they'll find we're the only company in the world doing it. So I'm quite happy with them then approaching us or inventing it themselves. As far as America is concerned, or the United States, we're only in the UK and Republic of Ireland currently and growing. But if we had 1,000 people in the United States saying, when's WelcoME coming? An investor would go, yeah, want to grab that. I guarantee you, if I was in San Francisco or somewhere like that right now, and I stood on a stage and said, I've got this, who wants it? Who wants to invest in something that could access the $8 trillion spent by disabled people on the planet every year, then an investor would go, I think that's worth a couple of $100,000. We'll see where that goes. So yeah, I think more people talking about WelcoME is brilliant. More people talking about disabled people having power is brilliant. More disabled people in power in government would be brilliant, because then their representation matters. And yeah, that's what I want. I want this to be everywhere, not necessarily for me, but for everyone to be able to use it. So get talking, United States. Let's get across there.
Yes.
That's a hell of an action item.
I also am pretty sure I heard an action item of Gavin on stages in the US. So get your Scottish butt over.
I was visiting the guide dog school in Morristown, where the very first guide dog owner came from Switzerland and turned up in New York. And then the TV cameras came along and said, walk across the 6-lane highway. And he took his guide dog and he walked across, and everybody went, wow, that's amazing. And he went, I wasn't trying to do that. Anyway, I went to Morristown with Lucas Frank, who was just one of the most amazing, truly respected men in America for starting or being involved in the guide dog movement. Anyway, Lucas Frank, amazing guy. And we went into a bottle shop, as you do. And I went to go and pay for this alcohol. And I went to the front, and the person said, I'm not going to do an American accent, but said something like, is that everything for you, sir? And I was like, oh, that's terrible. And I went, yeah, thank you very much. And they went, oh my God, you're British. And I was like, I then started, I came over all Hugh Grant. I was like, yeah, hello, my name's Gavin and I want to buy it. And it was like, so if I can do that on stage, I'll be more than happy. I'll make the most of my British accent.
There we go.
It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
We're always villains these days. They're using British actors to be villains in American movies all the time now. It used to be Germans and Russians. It seems to be Brits now.
I'm very sorry. I mean,
what are you going to do? Loki.
I don't know. Loki's turning it around now.
What is he? I haven't watched it. No, that's plot spoiler, right?
No, it's
you see
it. There's some goodness in there. It's complicated.
I was thinking Loki at the same time you were, because I know it's just been out just recently, and he's very British.
Very much so.
He's a very good dancer as well. He's very British.
That's what I've heard. Good with languages as well. Maybe he's the next guest. That's good.
Let's get him. Yes. I was trying to get Ryan Reynolds and Rob. What's Rob's last name? I can't remember. He's the not famous one.
Robert Downey Jr. Rob. Yeah, there's loads of them.
No.
But yeah, no. Well, I mean, the great thing about having me on is that I should be an easy act to follow without getting too famous. There's plenty of people out there that can match me in awesomeness.
Too modest. You're good.
Well, it's truly a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you, because the States doesn't have this yet, and it needs to. It needs to have this or something similar.
Exactly.
And why reinvent the wheel when all you really have to do is get us across the Atlantic, and we can just very easily do it. It's not a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I certainly feel that way, especially when I definitely see this in academia. It's basically a lot of people saying the same things over and over again, and just with a different light. But I mean, the other component of that too is just being able to approach it in a way that's going to be just a little bit more intent. Think about it for 5 minutes, right? Not having to niche down. I mean, we all see that on YouTube and everything, where it's like, well, here's the specific thing that we need for this specific purpose, and find your niche and exploit that and push that further. But I really appreciate the chat that we've had today with this, and saying, you know what? It takes hard work. We have to look at everything. That doesn't mean we have to look at it all at once. It's like, okay, how does this work? How does this work? How do these interplay with each other? And I really like the intentionality behind the way that you've grown this.
Well, here's a great point. Let's just say I was talking to a business right now. Let's say you two were in a business in the United Kingdom, and you really loved WelcoME, and you said, when can we have it? I could have WelcoME set up by tomorrow morning easily in your business overnight. And tomorrow morning, you'd be live on our system, providing WelcoME as a service. And you go, I listen to people saying all the time, we really must improve. And you go, well, improve then. It's there.
Exactly.
Just do it. Just say yes. I'll do it. If you don't like it, then we'll get rid of it. But I guarantee you'll like it, because we've got such a low churn rate. People don't, once they start using WelcoME, they don't leave it behind. And you go, if it's only going to take 2 hours to set up, and it's only going to cost you $40 a month to use it, and it can be done overnight, take your freaking foot out of your mouth and actually act instead of talking about it all the time.
Exactly.
Thank you for the chat. It's been brilliant. I love the fact that I'm your first guest. Love the fact I had a chance to talk to Krejci. And next time I want to see some sourdough bread.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I hope we don't cut out the talk about sourdough bread earlier. Otherwise,
Oh no, we're definitely keeping that in.
No, we will have to keep the sourdough bread.
No sense at all.
We'll do this for exclusive
Otherwise-
viewers. You can see the sourdough.
Ooh, there we go. Hey, it could be our extras. Yes.
yeah, the outtakes.
Give us a donation, and you can see my sourdough bread.
Put us on Patreon.
Awesome, absolutely brilliant.
Man, thank you so much, Gavin.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure. It's been a real pleasure, and welcome me back in 10 years' time when you've gone strength to strength, and then I'm up there with Rob, whoever he was at that point.
Making sourdough bread together.
Join us next time as we welcome Katerina Rivera, founder of Blindish Latina, DEI expert, TEDx speaker, and location-independent lifestyle guru, who will be talking to us about disability and travel. Katerina has so much great information to share, but we especially love her determination.
So if you are intimidated by beginning, know that beginning is really important, because then you get yourself started and you're going to be on a journey where you will look back in the future and see that things are not as hard anymore. I would encourage you to be brave for things that you're passionate about and that you truly don't want to miss out on.
You truly don't want to miss out on this episode. Hit that subscribe button. An important part of our podcast work is to bring awareness and connection to various disability advocates around the world.
If you're interested in sharing your story and want to connect with a network of other like-minded organizations, please consider joining our coalition.
We are calling the coalition GAIN, the Global Accessibility and Inclusion Network. Click the sign-up link below to learn more.
Sweet.
It's been good fun for me. I've enjoyed it, but I have had 2 glasses of wine, so that might explain it.